Hello again, friends, and thank you for joining me for another true crime case. I am Rachel. If you have not been here before, welcome. The case that I have today is a very interesting one. So you know that here in the true crime sphere of things, we don't get a lot of feel-good stories. We've got a lot of victims and a lot of villains, not a lot of heroes. And I think that you will find the subject of our story today does qualify as a hero. She at least is a personal hero of mine. I cannot wait to tell you about her story. First, real quick, personal note. If you've been with me before, you may have noticed I've been gone for a minute. I did post on my community tab. Miss Rona came to visit my household. We've had a rough couple of months. I've got some other things going on as well, but it's just been, it's been kind of tough. The main sort of situation with this particular illness is being exhausted and tired all the time and having terrible brain fog. So putting any kind of pen to paper, writing any of that stuff has been like impossible. And then on top of it, just all the and you would not have wanted to hear me. I still don't feel 100% back to myself, but I did feel good enough at least to join you here today. So yay. Thank you so very much for your patience. Again, I'm just really excited to be back here with you right now. So let's not put this off any longer. Let's jump right into the story. One day in September of 2006, Portland, Oregon resident Susan Kuhnhausmen arrived home from a long shift as an ER nurse. I don't know if you all know any ER nurses. They are a special breed of people. I'm telling you, they work so hard under such stressful conditions. That is what Susan did. It was her passion. She loved nursing. She loved being in the ER. She loved helping people. Now, Susan was not the youngest anymore. She was 51 years old. She had some bad knees. So she was working double time on these, usually 10, 12-hour shifts. So she was very much ready when she got home to relax, rest, put her feet up, and she deserved to do that. Now, when she got home, she did notice that all the blinds in the house were drawn, like they were pulled down. And she thought she had opened them up. It was her habit to open up the blinds every morning, let the light in. But obviously, she was probably exhausted. She didn't think that much of it, that is, until she went into her bedroom to change out of her nasty old scrubs, put on something a little more comfortable, and was promptly attacked by a man wielding a claw hammer. This man had been in her home, lying in wait for her to walk in the door. When he took her by surprise, she immediately took a blow to the head and the face. And as her eye began to swell and the blood began to drip into her eyes, she looked into the face of her attacker. And she could see that his intention was to kill her. That's what he was there for. And in that moment, Susan Kuhnhausmen made a very important decision. She decided that she was going to live or die fighting. And so she fought back, eventually wrestling the hammer away from the would-be assassin and recalling some self-defense advice that her father had given her years before. This is some oddly specific advice, but it resonated with me because it sounds exactly like something that my dad would have told me. He said to her, if you need to hurt somebody with a hammer, use the claw side. Very practical advice. Why would anybody need to hurt somebody with a hammer? Well, who knows? But Susan found herself in this situation, and it's a really good thing that she remembered that advice because she turned that hammer around and she was able to get in a couple good hits to the attacker's head. As she continued to struggle against him, he remarked to her, kind of in a surprised way, "You're strong." Apparently, he thought that the 51-year-old nurse was going to be easy work, and boy, was he wrong. As she continued to come after him with the hammer, she demanded to know who had sent him there to kill her. Now I'm going to take just a tiny little pause there for a second. There had to have been something going on already in Susan's head, right? Because generally when you're attacked by somebody, your immediate thought isn't like, who sent this person? Unless you're a CIA operative or like a mobster of some kind, you're probably not on the constant lookout for assassins. But Susan had an inkling. Apparently, she thought that someone might have a reason to want her dead. Susan eventually did wrestle this man down to the ground and was able to straddle him and get her hands around his throat. And she began to choke him, all the while asking, "Who sent you?" She even promised the man, "Tell me who sent you, and I will call you an ambulance." Okay, this is hardcore, right? Susan, what a badass. She is fighting tooth and nail against all odds. She was not going to die in her house that day. Kudos to you, Susan. Unfortunately, the attacker never did answer her question. He just started going blue. Not quite knowing her own strength with all the adrenaline, Susan had crushed his windpipe. So he was no longer breathing, and it didn't take long before he was no longer living. The whole ordeal had taken about 14 minutes. 14 minutes of fear and confusion and running on pure adrenaline, but Susan survived. She was able to look at him a little bit, and this assailant was completely unknown to her, and he had never disclosed who it was that wanted her gone. But it didn't really matter, because Susan, in her heart, already knew the answer to that question. There was only one man she knew who was angry enough to send a hitman after her, and that was her estranged husband, Michael Kuhnhausen. Susan immediately ran to the neighbor's house to call the police. When the police arrived at the home, they did find this man, who was quickly identified as 59-year-old Edward Haffey, just still lying on the floor where Susan had left him. In fact, until the police confirmed it, she wasn't sure she had actually killed him. She was sorry. She said she felt bad for his family. It was not her intention to try to kill him, but ultimately she felt like she did what she had to live. Now, Susan did express to the police her suspicions about her husband, and those suspicions were confirmed pretty quickly, because as the police did a search of the home, they found a backpack in the basement, which didn't belong to Susan, didn't belong to anybody in the home. It was determined to belong to Edward. In that backpack was $200 cash, a bottle of Hershey's chocolate syrup, and a note that said, "Call Mike." So let's talk about Susan and Mike. Susan and Mike met in 1988 through a personals ad that had been taken out by Susan's mother and her friend on her behalf. Now, apparently, and I'm conjecturing a little bit here based on this information I'm going to give you, apparently Susan's mother may have thought her weight was holding her back in her love life, since at 33 years old, Susan was still single, and the ad that her mother took out for her said this: SWF. That's a single white female, for those of you not up with your personal ad shorthand. SWF 33, overweight but not over life, seeks SM, that's single male, who wants more out of a relationship than just slender. Does anybody else think that it's a little bit odd that Susan's weight is the predominant topic in that personals ad, and the only requirement for a partner is that they be male and that they don't mind that she's fat? This feels icky to me. I'm sure, I have no doubt, Susan's mom had all the best intentions. That's weird. I guess maybe things were different in 1988. I don't think that would fly today. Maybe it would. I don't know. You tell me. I think it's a little odd, weird, and off-putting, but let me know in the comments what you think. Regardless, the ad was out there, and Michael Kuhnhausen is the one who responded to it. And he and Susan began a relationship over the phone, talking for hours and hours before they ever met face to face. Michael was 39 years old. He had been divorced, and he told Susan that he loved the outdoors, all of the outdoors, whether it was wandering through a cave or taking a long walk on the beach. For their first date, they went to feed the ducks at the Crystal Springs Rhododendron Garden, and before the year was out, they were driving together to Reno, Nevada, to tie the knot. For Susan, it was kind of poetic that they would be starting their life together in a city that is well known for its many casinos, because for her, marriage was the ultimate gamble. Her own parents had gotten divorced when she was pretty young, and she was bounced around from place to place, privy in the way that children from divorced families are to all the ways in which a union can go bad. And Susan and Mike's union started to go bad before the ink was dry on the marriage certificate. Almost right away, Michael stopped socializing with Susan. Their hiking trips and outdoor excursions dwindled down to zero. Over a fairly short amount of time, his previously warm and easygoing disposition gave way to his much truer self. A man that was deeply unhappy, dissatisfied with life, and very pessimistic. Susan quickly discovered his real credo, and this is a quote: "Life is a shit sandwich, and every day you take a bite until you die." The person Mike Kuhnhausen was revealing himself to be was a far cry from the loving, adventurous man that Susan thought she had married. And soon enough came more surprise personality traits. Mike was controlling and angry. If Susan wanted to go out with her friends or even just go shopping, she was hounded with questions from her husband. Where will you be? How long will you be gone? Who's going to be with you? When are you coming home? And every single penny that she spent was scrutinized and complained about. Now, mind you, this is a professional woman. She is a nurse. She has a steady, good-paying job. Mike was a janitor at an adult bookstore. Okay, and that is a euphemism. If you are not aware, an adult bookstore is like a dirty movie place for not safe for work adult materials. And he worked there cleaning up. I think it's safe to say that Susan was bringing home the bacon, but Mike felt that he got to make the decisions about how much bacon got to be eaten and who got the biggest portions. Probably the fact that she made more money than he did contributed to that behavior, right? And I don't mean to get all psychological on you. I am not in any way a mental health professional, but I don't think it takes a mental health professional to know that a lot of times those controlling behaviors can be rooted in feelings of shame and inadequacy, anger as well, but I think that the anger a lot of times comes from feeling a little bit ashamed. And I would bet that Mike probably was ashamed that his wife made more money than he did. Also, I think that he was weak and a coward, but that's just my personal opinion. In 2005, after 17 years of marriage, Susan was done. She cared about her husband, but she was completely miserable. He had dragged her down for long enough, and she was ready to be happy again. So she asked for a divorce. Now, old Mikey, he did try to change her mind, but Susan would not be moved on this issue. She asked Mike, please, to move out of the house. She did not bother, however, to change the locks or the alarm code. She just really didn't think that she needed to. Michael, for all of his anger and misery and all of that, had never been violent towards her. So she didn't really see him as any kind of physical threat. And that pretty much catches us up to that fateful day, September 6th, 2006, and Ed Haffey laying dead on Susan Kuhnhausen's floor. Now, Haffey, as it turns out, was a drug addict with a pretty troubling criminal record. First of all, when they autopsied him, they found that he had a nearly lethal dose of cocaine in his system. So it is really incredible that Susan was able to overpower him the way that she did. You know, that stuff really gets your everything pumping. It jazzes you up. And police had discovered that Haffey had been arrested in 1991 for the murder of his girlfriend at that time, Georgia Dutton, when they pulled her decomposed body out of a river. He pled guilty to conspiracy to commit murder in 1994, and he spent 9 short years in prison for that. So when he was released in 2003, of course, he needed to find a job. But who hires murderous ex-cons? I know. Smut peddlers, purveyors of 18-plus erotic material. That's right. Ed Haffey went to work alongside Mike Kuhnhausen, mopping baby gravy up off the floor at Fantasy Adult Video. Investigators made the link, and they made it quickly, and it seemed plausible, likely even, that Mike had asked his ex-con coworker to kill his soon-to-be ex-wife. But of course, when they went to look for him, good old Mike was on the lam. All the police had to go on was a suicide note that Mike had left at his father's house and a record that he had bought a Taurus 357 Magnum at a pawn shop on the night of the attack. So of course, the authorities put out a bulletin. It took them 5 days to track him down, but they did eventually find him in Clackamas County, which is a different county than the one he lived in, at the Kaiser Sunnyside Medical Center in the parking garage. Now, when confronted, Mike claimed that he was in that parking garage of the Kaiser Sunnyside Medical Center because he was going to check himself in. He told the police officer, quote, "I have nothing to live for anymore." How very convenient, Mike. You send somebody to kill your soon-to-be ex-wife, and all of a sudden, you now discover that you need to check yourself in for some intensive mental health care. Perhaps you should have done that before you hired someone to kill her. Just a thought. So since he had made this outcry that he wanted to unalive himself, they did force him into a psychiatric hold, as is standard practice. But just 11 hours later, they arrested him for conspiracy to commit murder. When looking at the surface of this situation, one is left with the impression that Mike wanted his wife killed because he was angry at having been dumped by her, right? That being kicked out of his home was his only motivation. But as investigators dug deeper into this situation, they found an even more compelling reason that Mike may have wanted Susan dead. As it turns out, Mike had lost his job at Fantasy Adult Video just a few weeks before the attempted murder. And Susan's house, the one that she and Mike had shared during their marriage, was worth about $300,000. It was all paid off, and if something happened to Susan, it would be all Mike's. Of course, Mr. Kuhnhausen initially tried to deny any kind of involvement, but the evidence was overwhelming. First of all, there was no forced entry into the house. And the records from the alarm system showed that somebody with the correct code had disabled the alarm before entering the home, which means that Haffey had the alarm code. And who could he possibly have gotten that code from? His good buddy and coworker, Mike Kuhnhausen. Seriously, what a rookie mistake, Mike. And that was just like the first thing. Then a former cellmate of Ed Haffey's came forward and said that he had met with both Ed and Mike had offered him $5,000 to kill his wife. Of course, they also had the note in the date book that was found at the scene that said, "Call Mike." Pretty obvious there. And faced with all this evidence and also the fact that he was the only person who had any motive to kill Susan at all, Mike Kuhnhausen finally just went ahead and pled guilty. It was about a year later, right before he was set to go to trial. And so he went to jail for organizing the murder of his wife. Unfortunately, Mike's guilty plea was little solace to Susan, who went back to her maiden name and now known as Susan Walters, because he only received a sentence of 10 years in prison. Susan would spend the next years of her life constantly looking over her shoulder, scared to death that her ex-husband was going to send someone after her again. She super secured her home. She even laid gravel all around the perimeter so that she could always hear if somebody was approaching. She also sued Michael in civil court, a suit that she won. She was awarded $1 million. And even though she knew that Michael would literally never be able to pay off such a large settlement, it didn't matter to her. She didn't even care about getting the money. She just wanted to make sure that he would never be able to accrue enough funds to hire a hitman ever again. But despite all of her precautions, Susan became increasingly anxious as Michael's release date approached. His short sentence was being cut even shorter since he was being let out after serving only 7 of his 10 years. However, fate seemed to have been on Susan Walters' side when, on June 13th, 2014, a Friday the 13th, by the way, Michael Kuhnhausen breathed his last breath after losing his battle with cancer. He died in prison, just weeks shy of being a free man. And with that, Susan Walter was finally free from the fear that had haunted her since that horrible September day when she faced her would-be murderer and came out on top. So I have said that this woman is my hero, and that is something that Susan has heard a lot. But as a nurse, a healer, she's sort of struggled with people viewing her as heroic for killing a man. But I think that we can all agree with some words that her boss had for her when she expressed her discomfort with being categorized this way. They said, "They're not calling you a hero because you killed a man. They're calling you a hero because they want to believe, given the same circumstances, they too might survive." I think that that statement is so beautifully said and truly said. And I would be really remiss if I didn't mention that her reaction when she found out about the death of her ex-husband, when she was asked about her feelings regarding him being gone, she handled it with so much more grace than I would have, because I probably would have said something like, "It serves the bastard right." But what Susan said was that she felt bad for Mike's family and that she felt really sorrowful for the loss of the man that he could have been if he hadn't let his anger and all of his negative feelings guide him. I really thought that that was really moving and gracious, and I just think that this woman is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed telling you the story about Susan Walter, and I hope that you found it a little bit inspirational, which is something that we don't get a lot of in true crime. I just thought we could all use somebody to root for, just this once. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. And do something to take care of yourself today and every day. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.